Chapter 9 For the Boy Who Has Everything. It had gotten cold the week before Christmas. A big storm from Canada had moved down over the Midwest and brought lots of snow and sleet and ice. For 2 days, big blankets of gray clouds moved over us from the north, and everybody said there'd be snow and plenty of it by Christmas. Mom and Papa were going crazy hiding presents for us, and me and Caleb were going just as crazy locating them all. It was the Wednesday that school let out. Christmas was the following Monday. At the supper table, Callie was acting very nervous. I thought maybe there was something I wanted to tell everyone, she said. You've always got something to say, Caleb commented. Not like this, she went on, because I need everyone's help. What is it? Asked Papa, finishing up his cherry pie. I could tell just by looking at Mama that she knew what it was all about. I'm not positive you understand, Callie said, but I think I like Herbie Coggins, and he's asked me to the Christmas dance at school. Big deal, I said. Close your yap, said Papa. I think that's just wonderful, dear. You see, said Callie, he's coming to pick me up at 7:30 this Saturday, and I've just got to have everything go all right. For some reason she was looking from me to Caleb when she said it. You mustn't hurt him, or tease him, or roll his car away, or try to get him to wrestle. Why, of course not, said Caleb. I'll see that the boys behave, said Papa. And I want you to have your new suit, Papa, Callie said. What new suit? You might as well go ahead and get that new flannel one we looked at downtown last week, Orville, said Mama. You've been needing another one for a long time. Papa looked from Mama to Callie like he'd been tricked into something. The next morning after breakfast, I got the $525 out of my bank and decided to go ahead and get something for Caleb for Christmas. Mama had told me I shouldn't give him an old dog bone or mud ball like I did last year. I wish for once, she said, you'd try to get something that Caleb would really appreciate. I want you to buy it with your own money and not even tell Papa or me what it is. Then I know you are growing up and were old enough to feel the true Christmas spirit. Outside, the air was so cold it cut into your chest when you breathed it. I stood on our front stoop and looked around at all this new snow just waiting to be horsed around in. Down Rainwater Street, on the vacant lot on the corner, I could see Amos Finch and Harvey Willis rolling big balls of snow to make a fort with. The snow was on the wet side and just right for making forts. When I got down to the corner, I stood and watched Amos and Harvey work for a while. What are you guys doing? I asked. What does it look like we're doing? Said Amos without even looking up at me. You guys going to make a fort? Over there, between those two trees. You want to help? Sure, I said, and we spent the whole morning working on that fort. It was real neat, too, when we'd finished caulking up the seams between the big snowballs. We even took some of the for sale signs from the lots around the corner and made a roof over part of our fort. That afternoon, we made snowballs. I don't mean we made a few snowballs. We made hundreds of them and stored them inside the fort. Dink joined us in the afternoon and sat on a box over at one end of our fort and turned out an amazing number of perfectly round snowballs, like he was a red-headed snowball machine. Amos and I were making snowballs too, but they weren't nearly as good as Dink's. Harvey Willis was still improving on the fort. How many do you reckon we ought to make? Amos inquired. We'll need a lot, said Dink. I don't mean to sound nosy, said Harvey, but what for? Just in case of a fight, we will, said Dink. We can always use more than you make, if a fight turns up. Who are we going to fight? I asked him. Anybody who wants to, said Dink. We're not scared of anybody. No, sir, we're not, added Harvey, the youngest of us. But that afternoon we just made snowballs. We didn't run across anybody who wanted a snowball fight. Finally, Dink had to go home, and Harvey decided to go with him. We'll have us a battle tomorrow, yelled Dink as he was leaving, but he forgot to mention who with. After they were gone, me and Amos quit making snowballs and walked around our fort, proud of how strong it was and how real it looked. It was starting to get dark early, as it always does on these overcast winter days. The snow seemed to muffle the car noises from over on Main Street, and you could hear a hound yapping at something in the woods at the edge of town. The smoke came up from all the chimneys along Rainwater Street and kind of floated straight up, where it finally melted into the same color as the sky, and you couldn't see it anymore. I better go home too, Amos sighed. She's really a beaut, isn't she? He said, looking at our fort again. When he left, it was kind of spooky, standing there in the early darkness. The two big oak trees that made up the ends of our fort stretched blackly up into the sky, like roots reaching clear up to heaven. For the first time all day I felt cold. I shivered and put my hands in my pockets. My gloves had gotten soaked, and I had set them in my fort. By now they were frozen solid to the hard-packed ice of the floor. It was getting much colder. Way up the street I could make out the figure of Slim, a person that did odd jobs around town, and he was headed right down Rainwater Street. He was leading something on a rope, but I couldn't tell what it was because of the darkness. I waited and let him come on, and carefully gripped one of the snowballs from the top of Dink's pile. Being cold and all, I guess is why my throat went wide. I missed Slim entirely, but I hit that thing he was leading. I hit it right near the center of the rear section. The snowball made a kind of stinging smack as it hit, and disintegrated on the flank of whatever it was. It didn't take to that snowball so well. Like a spring uncoiling, it suddenly lurched forward and caught Slim just below the small of the back, sending him straight through the air for about 8 feet, and landing him face down in a snowbank at the edge of the sidewalk. Slim just lay where he had suddenly been sent. I was starting to get worried when the legs that were sticking out of the hole in the snow began to move, and Slim crawled out and stood up, brushing off snow and speaking to that thing in a low voice. At last I figured out what it was that he had been leading. It was the biggest blooming goat I had ever seen. Since Slim hadn't even seen my snowball, I decided to go out and have a closer look. Why, that goat must have stood 4 feet high at the shoulder. "Hey, Slim," I yelled. "What you got?" "Who's that?" "Oh, Wallins, ain't it?" He squinted at me in the darkness. Your brother ain't round here, is he?" He looked around for Caleb with worry written all over his face. Caleb had thrown a play snake on Slim one day when Slim was working on the bushes in front of our house. That's why Slim didn't trust Caleb. "No, he's at home, Slim," I said. "Is that your goat?" "Sometimes I don't know if he's mine or if I'm his. Why, that there goat like to bust me open, and I'm just leading him down this street here." Slim carefully rubbed the place where it hurt. "Biggest and meanest goat I ever seen, that at Carlisle." "Hey, Slim, would you sell him to me?" "Carlisle? Would you sell your goat to me so I can give him to Caleb for a Christmas present?" "Sell him? Why, How much would you give for him?" "I've got $5.25. I'll give you that for him." I could hear my heart beating as I stood there in the cold. What a present that goat would make for Caleb. "You want to give this here goat to your brother?" "Yeah, he'd like a pet for Christmas." "Well now," Slim smiled, "you gonna give him to that brother, I reckon I could let you have him." He kind of laughed. "That Caleb, he gave me a pet one time too, you know," he chuckled. I gave Slim the money, and he gave me the rope with Carlisle on the other end, and then he walked off down the street, chuckling to himself as he went. It happened so quick, I didn't have time to stop and really think about it very carefully. It had just seemed like a good idea. So there I stood, holding onto a rope that was tied to the biggest goat in Ogleno County. I wondered what Papa would think of me buying Slim's goat. I decided not to take Carlisle home for a while. "Hey, here, Carlisle. Come on, Carlisle," I coaxed, pulling gently at the rope. Surprisingly enough, Carlisle did come just the way I pulled him, which happened to be in the direction of our fort. There I tied him to one of the oak trees where he would be hidden from the street. Then I went home to supper.